There's one moment narcissists fear the most, not when you scream, not when you cry, not even when you curse them out. It's when you go silent, when you disappear emotionally, no reaction, no explanation, no turning back. That's when they know they've lost control over you. And that realization? It's the beginning of their internal collapse. A narcissist can handle hatred. They know how to manipulate rage. But indifference, silence, total disappearance from their orbit, that's the one thing they cannot tolerate. Because your silence isn't empty, it's powerful. It says you no longer get to pull the strings here. And when they realize that, their entire illusion of control starts to crumble. In this video, we'll explore what really happens when the narcissist finally understands you're gone for good, not just physically, but emotionally, energetically, and spiritually. Do they change? Do they regret? Or do they just switch tactics to re-enter your life? Watch until the end to discover the final tricks they pull and why your calm, unwavering silence is the most devastating blow you could ever deliver. Don't forget to subscribe for more healing truth on narcissistic abuse and recovery. Let's dive in. Your silence isn't the end. It's the first declaration of an internal revolution. To a narcissist, you were once an irreplaceable source of supply, a mirror that reflected their grandiose illusion of control, a source of validation, a target to manipulate, a reminder that they still mattered. They were used to your reactions. When they lashed out, you explained. When they went silent, you reached out. When they left, you chased. Every gesture, every tear, every question, you fed their ego with emotional energy. So when you go silent, when you disappear without a trace, it's not just an absence. It's a rejection of their power. They can no longer read your mind, manipulate your response, or control the beat of your emotional rhythm. And in the narcissist's world, a loss of control is a loss of identity. At this point, they're not just angry or hurt. They are panicking. Because for the first time, they're forced to face their own emptiness. There's no one left to reflect back their image, no one left to play their game, no one to blame. And that not the loss of you, but the loss of influence over you is what shakes them to the core. You might think they don't care, that they've moved on, jumped into a new relationship, flaunted their new life on social media. But the truth is, when they realize you're truly gone, when you're no longer reacting or playing the game, your silence becomes a threat. Not with words, but by no longer needing to be understood, no longer needing closure, no longer needing them at all. And do you know what terrifies them the most? Not your anger, your healing. Because a person who no longer hurts is a person who has reclaimed their power. And narcissists hold no power over someone who has healed themselves. What comes next isn't genuine remorse. It's a desperate scramble to regain control. They'll accidentally message you, like an old post, or have a mutual friend mention them. They're not doing this because they miss you. They're doing it to check, is the door still open? Are you still emotionally available? And when you don't respond, when you stay quiet, they escalate. Maybe they smear your name, play the victim, or suddenly act like they're devastated. Not out of love, but out of fear. Fear that you've stepped out of their universe, that you're living a life they're no longer the center of. What they've really lost isn't you. It's their control over you. And that's something they cannot bear. When the narcissist realizes you're truly gone, they don't retreat, they shift tactics. At first, it's silence. Then it's subtle checking in. And next, it's performance. They know you're someone with deep empathy, someone who once longed for resolution, who forgave even when they didn't deserve it. They've seen the softest parts of your heart. And now they'll try to use those against you. They might return with a gentle message, just wanted to wish you peace, or something vague and loaded, I still think about what we had. Hope you're okay. Sometimes it's a half apology, I wasn't perfect, but I never meant to hurt you. And if you're still healing, if you're still clinging to the hope that maybe, just maybe, they've changed, those words can hit deep. But don't be fooled. This isn't remorse. This is a test. They're trying to see if you'll respond, if you still feel, if any emotional thread remains uncut. Because if you reply even with a single message, they know the door isn't fully closed. That they still have access to your mind, your heart. That they might still move you with the same old tricks, vague apologies, teary eyes, stories where they were the victim all along. And if gentleness doesn't work, they'll switch masks. They may become irritated or even threatening. You're so cold now. You're not the same person I fell for. You'll regret losing me. Why the switch? Because you're not responding the way they expect. And when you stop reacting, they feel invisible. And to a narcissist, invisibility is ego death. Your emotional self-control is something they never anticipated. They were used to seeing you unravel, beg, explain. But now, you don't justify. You don't plead. You don't play by their rules anymore. You just disengage, and that makes them feel small. Your silence is not a tactic. It's a transformation. You no longer react because you've stepped outside of their world. You're learning to live life on your own terms without needing validation from someone who once dragged you to your lowest. You're healing. And that healing, quiet, steady and unshakable, is something they cannot control, cannot decode, and definitely cannot tolerate. That's when they begin their next act, the fake awakening. They'll tell you they've changed, that they've gone to therapy, that they've learned about boundaries and emotional safety, that they're working to become a better person. They'll echo the very words you once used: trauma, healing, energy, emotional intelligence. They'll mimic your journey like a chameleon, not to evolve, but to re-enter your life. And if you let your guard down, if you open the door even slightly, they'll creep back in, not with a new heart, but with a new strategy. A false version of growth. But if you're paying attention, you'll see it. The behavior may shift, but the core doesn't change. They still care about one thing: controlling your emotional reality. When every other tactic fails, when your silence doesn't break, when the door doesn't open, when you no longer react to love or blame, the narcissist plays their final card: closure. They'll say things like, "I just want to talk one last time," or "You owe me an explanation." Maybe even, "I think we should end this like adults." It sounds reasonable, even mature. You're someone with emotional depth. You believe in resolving things with integrity. You still have questions that were never answered. You think maybe this is the moment they'll actually listen. But be careful. This isn't closure. It's a trap. Because true closure doesn't demand persuasion. It doesn't ask you to reopen wounds just to help someone else understand. Real closure comes from truth, from accountability, from taking ownership. And that's something narcissists don't do. The conversation they're proposing isn't about letting you speak, it's about reclaiming control of the narrative. You'll hear cleverly crafted lines like, "I know I made mistakes, but you weren't perfect either. I only reacted that way because you pushed me too far. I was hurt too. That's why I hurt you." Sounds like ownership. It's not. It's a reframing of guilt, a way to blur the line between abuser and victim. And if you're not grounded, you'll begin to wonder, maybe I was too harsh, maybe I wasn't patient enough. Suddenly, you're back in the old loop, doubting yourself, making excuses for them, questioning your own truth. They didn't come to close the story. They came to rewrite it in a way that serves their ego. And if you agree with even a fraction of their version, they'll reclaim emotional leverage gently, subtly, but with intention. They don't want you free. They want you bound, still thinking of them, still emotionally entangled, still wondering if closure means giving them one last chance. To them, your lingering regret is proof they still matter. And what truly enrages them, not your anger, your indifference, your peace, your ability to move on without needing their final blessing. You're rewriting the ending without their permission, without their validation, and without their participation. And that, to a narcissist, is unacceptable. So remember, true closure doesn't come from someone who distorted the truth. It comes from finally seeing clearly and realizing you don't need to explain yourself anymore. You don't need an apology. You don't need a dramatic final scene. You don't need them to acknowledge your pain. You don't need to step back into the theater they've created just to get a proper ending. You've already ended it the moment you stopped needing closure from them. Silence, it sounds simple. But for someone who lived in emotional chaos, who was manipulated through rage, through calculated silence, through twisted conversations, real silence is unbelievably powerful. You once used words as a way to survive. You explained. You defended. You reasoned. You sent novel-length texts just to clarify things you should never have had to justify. But nothing changed. Nothing was understood. Everything you said was twisted, turned against you, or dismissed. And then, finally, you went silent. Not because you were weak, but because you were tired of spending your power on someone who never valued it. And here's what's interesting, that's when the narcissist starts to notice for real. Not when you cried, not when you begged, but when you said nothing. Silence is the one thing they can't manipulate. They can't twist it. They can't argue with it. They can't bait it. It forces them to face something they've spent their life avoiding: the truth. The truth that they no longer control you, that their presence no longer holds weight, that their identity is no longer reflected through your words, your text, your explanations, your pain. Silence is the final rejection of the role they once played in your life. And to them, that's unacceptable. They can't tolerate being hated. In fact, they often provoke it because hate is still a form of connection. It's still energy. It still keeps them relevant. But silence doesn't. Your silence is like a door slammed shut, no cracks, no games, no negotiations. It's a clear boundary. You don't get to come back here anymore. And for the narcissist who always believed they had a spare key to your life, that is a complete collapse. They'll be confused. They'll be angry. They'll question, what is she thinking? Is she testing me? Will she come back? And if you maintain your silence, they'll panic. That's why silence is never avoidance. It's declaration. A declaration that you've left the game, that you're no longer a part of the emotional theater where your pain feeds their ego. Silence is also where you begin to hear yourself again. No more internal yelling. No more second-guessing. No more trying to fix what was never yours to fix. In that quiet space, you begin to feel your own breath. For the first time in a long time, you realize you don't need to be understood or accepted. You just need peace. And the beautiful thing is you're already finding it. The moment you choose silence, no reactions, no replies, no explaining, you are reclaiming your power in a way they can never touch. When your silence becomes too loud, when you don't react, don't rage, don't miss them. The narcissist can't sit still. And they will come back, but this time, not with cruelty, not with arrogance. This time they return wearing a new version of themselves. They might say, I've been working on myself. I've learned a lot from my mistakes. I realize I didn't treat you right. I'm learning to respect boundaries and heal my past. Sounds mature, right? Like maybe they've finally awakened. But you need to pause, take a deep breath, and observe, not react. Because this is one of the most deceptive tactics a narcissist will ever use, mirroring your healing, copying your evolution, just to get back in. They haven't truly changed. They're simply repeating your language, your growth journey, your values, everything you once pleaded for in those past conversations, so they can lower your defenses. They know you've evolved. And to access this higher version of you, they must now perform growth. They'll imitate kindness. They'll talk about inner work, healing the inner child. They'll send pictures of therapy books or their morning meditations. But if you step back far enough, you'll notice nothing has really changed. It's still them, just dressed in new vocabulary. You'll notice they still don't respect your boundaries. They still try to control your time. They still react when you say no. They still center every conversation around themselves. The only difference is, this time they sound more enlightened. And this is why discernment becomes your most powerful tool. Not bitterness, not suspicion, discernment. The ability to see beyond words, to recognize patterns over promises, and to know the difference between regret and manipulation. They're not returning because of love. They're returning because your healing threatens their ego. They can't stand watching you thrive without them. They can't tolerate knowing you breathe, live, and love without their presence, without their permission. That shakes the fantasy where they were always the center of your universe. And if they can't come back as your joy, they'll try to sneak in through your guilt, your nostalgia, your sentimentality. Remember that beach trip we took together? I still have that birthday photo you sent me. No one ever understood me like you did. But you know the truth. Beautiful memories don't erase toxic behavior. Love isn't enough to justify losing yourself. And no one, not even someone you once loved deeply, deserves to break the peace you bled to rebuild. And then one day, you'll look back at everything not with trembling hands, not with bitterness. You won't be writing out long messages and deleting them. You won't torture yourself wondering why they couldn't love you the right way. You'll no longer wait for an apology. You won't need their acknowledgement that you were hurt. Because by then, you'll be healed enough not to need their validation anymore. When the narcissist realizes you're truly gone for good, it's not just that they lost a partner. It's that they lost their power. And you unplugged the machine they used to feed on your confusion, your guilt, your need to be understood. You don't have to scream that you're free. You don't have to post about how strong you've become. You just have to live quietly and authentically. No more playing by their rules. No more letting them define you. No more handing over your emotional thermostat to someone who only knew how to turn up the heat or the cold. You're no longer who you were. You are the version of yourself who walked through fire and came back with clearer eyes. So if they come back with the warm voice, the enlightened tone, and all the right words, remember, real change doesn't need to be announced. It shows up in consistent actions over time. And someone who shattered your heart without remorse doesn't earn their way back just because they picked up a few therapy terms. You deserve peace that doesn't need translation. Love that doesn't require rescuing. A relationship where you don't lose yourself just to keep it alive. If you're in the silent phase right now, don't be afraid. That silence is not emptiness. It's clearing space for your own voice to return. Keep healing. Keep walking forward. And if today feels lonely, remember, loneliness is still better than being trapped in a relationship that made you feel alone even when someone was next to you. You don't need closure from them. You are the closure.